All right, welcome everybody to the 7th episode of the Faculty Spotlight series sponsored by the Pan American Society of Mechanical Engineers at the University of Pennsylvania. As with our previous episodes, we strive to provide 100% free content that you will find interesting and outside of the box. Penn student body all knows and loves our professors in the classroom or maybe in the lab or research setting, but rarely do we as students appreciate them as much as we should and learn from them outside of coursework. Through this show, I've had the pleasure of breaking that norm, speaking privately with several Penn professors about subjects far beyond Arduinos and brushless DC motors. And today is certainly no exception. I'm joined today by two different people, very near and dear to my heart. First is my co-host and one of my meme classmates and best friends in the world, Andy Eskenazi. And our guest, our faculty guest, is a mentor and former professor of both mine and Andy's, not to mention a close family friend of mine, Sid Deliwala. Sid is actually a professor from ESE, which gives a nice change of pace from our history of bringing on mostly meme professors, and also celebrates the interdisciplinary nature of both of our fields. Furthermore, Andy and Sid are not originally from America, which I think will bring a whole new sense of perspective to today's discussion, which we have not actually had in previous episodes. So I'm very excited about that. And above all else, they are two of the most technically brilliant and personally charismatic engineers I've ever had the chance to speak or work with. And so I'm just really excited about this. So thank you guys for being on here. Andy, do you want to start things off just by introducing yourself for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that you're being too kind with your remarks. And I think like I can say the exact same things for you as well. Yeah, thank you for having me on my very first podcast as a co-host. I've seen them before, so I'm excited to be on this side of the screen this time. I guess I introduce myself. I'm Andy. I'm from Argentina, and I study mechanical, but I also did math. And I'm just a week away from finishing my master's in mechanical too. And so it's a lot of very different emotions going on right now as this journey ends. What about you, Sid? Who are you?
You asked me, right, Andy? I think for a second my audio got cut off.
Oh, you know, if you wanted to introduce yourself.
Yeah. Sure. Andy, first of all, congratulations on graduating. It's a very proud moment for all of us, believe it or not. Even though we are used to seeing people graduating every year, people who we know especially are very near and dear to us. And I remember both of you from my senior design class. By the way, for the audience knowledge, both Andy and Jason are meme students. They did interdisciplinary senior design in electrical and systems engineering, and both had a fabulous, they were different senior design projects, but they were both fantastic. I still cherish those presentations. Very nicely done, both of you. So congratulations, Jason, you are just one semester away from graduating. So it's actually wonderful. Well, I am glad to be on this podcast. I would say I have been stepping between student engagement actively through my in-person meetings, through courses, through my managing lab spaces in engineering since 1995 or maybe 1996. I've always made that mistake. But my entire career, I have seen students take a lot away from their engineering education, and that's actually a lot of fun for me. My principal job is to currently teach a freshman class, and which is ESE 111 or 1110 now, and a senior design class, which is a 2-semester sequence. I also oversee a class that I teach in spring called Silicon Garage. This is students who've not had exposure to technology from around the university to come and take this class. My other job is to manage the lab program in electrical and systems engineering. So I get involved in curriculum for several lab classes. And I also enjoy teaching my summer class, which is the M&T Summer Institute, which has been a lot of fun. So it's great to see people who I have known since high school, including Jason, who went in the same high school as my daughter. Boy, Jason, I've now known you since you were, I don't know what, school grade? It must be, at least high school, since maybe.
Yeah, well, Sonali and I did, Sid's daughter, Sonali, was a good friend of mine in high school, still is. And we actually did speech and debate together. So
That's
who
right.
would have thought that
Yes.
we would
Yeah.
wind up going to Penn engineering together, and her dad being a professor of mine. But yeah, we gave a lot of speeches.
Yeah. Lovely, lovely time with you, Jason. Very nice.
You too. The feeling is mutual. But yeah, I guess just to respond to that a little bit, like, you know, much of that was reviewed to me. Hopefully some of the listeners, some of that was new to them. Some of that was also new to me. I didn't realize you said you've been at Penn since 1995.
Yes.
That is longer than I had realized. I haven't been alive for even that long.
Yeah. And the strange thing is I am seeing alums come back with their kids who make them go to Penn. Okay. It's only then you realize that the gray hair means something. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything, right? So I live in the fountain of youth. The age group that I see is always between 17 and 22. So you never realize you're getting old. You know, your people who you see 5 to 7 hours a day are the same age group. So I think it keeps you young, but it's also a lot of fun to be among folks of your age.
Yeah. One thing I'm curious about, how has Penn changed in the last, let's see, you've been here, what, 20 plus years, 27 years or so?
Yes.
Most other professors we've interviewed are like 5 years tenured or less. And I haven't even been alive 25 years. So I'm curious, like, how has it evolved?
So I think it's day and night, both in terms of the way we make resources available to students, the way we have grown in terms of engineering faculty, our strength and size of the resources we put for use by students. But the main change that we saw was the expansion of the spaces. There was no Levine Hall, there was no Singh Center, there was no Skirkanich. There was a parking lot in those spaces, okay? So imagine engineering looking like DRL, where we had a lot of rooms, but not places to hang out, not auditoriums, no place to chat. And currently our campus is extremely lively, as you know. We can go from one building to the other. It's compact. You could make conversations when you meet people. That, I think, is the biggest change in terms of how you feel in an engineering school. We are very modern. We have all the resources. Also, the lab spaces. We were half the size in lab spaces across the engineering school, both in research and teaching. And today, all our lab spaces are cutting edge. You go to other schools, you realize, you look at their facilities and would say, wow, for an engineering school that's relatively small, right? Our incoming class is around 400 to 420. We have amazing resources available, okay? So I think the whole culture and the environment is very different from the time I came. And I also think it was very gradual, but last 5 years have been drastic. We have actually hired more faculty in the last 5 years. So since you've been here, both of you, a lot has changed, and a new building's coming up on 34th and Chestnut, which is the data building. I think you will find Penn Engineering suddenly, expanding in many directions.
Yeah, it's funny that you're mentioning all of these things because I was speaking, I think, yesterday with Tom Castle from Entrepreneurs, and we were chatting about the only other Argentine that was ever at Penn Engineering before, and that was Eduardo, who was the previous dean. And I think like he may have been responsible for many of these transformations that
Yes.
you're describing. Like he preceded BJ, that
Yeah,
is currently the dean.
And I think in his term, we certainly built Levine Hall,
Levine Hall, yeah.
and the Singh Center. So majority of the expansion got kicked off from his time.
But we did lose our civil engineering department, and for us, it's something that we spoke about before.
Which I think was before my times.
That was before.
Because when I came in, we saw systems engineering as a new addition to engineering, which I think was an offshoot from civil. But also we have become much more collaborative, right? There is a lot more collaboration between different schools. The medical school is much more closer to us, both in research and in exchange of resources. So I think this is a great time for Penn Engineering.
Oh, that is super nice to hear. Unfortunately, our journeys are ending soon, but I could only go back in time. But that leads me to ask, because yes, I definitely agree that it is the time to be an engineer at Penn Engineering. And so what sort of things can incoming freshman students do if they want to get involved in research or make use of, exploit these multidisciplinary resources that one can find here? Because, and you know it from us, we were both mechanical engineers at systems engineering. But what are some of the things that come to your mind with this question?
So I think the freshmen tend to go by the trends, right? So I have seen freshmen coming in, and at one point, everybody wanted to do robotics. At some point, everybody wanted to do embedded systems, okay? Then more recently, everybody wants to do tech more in software and more towards computer science. But I also think that we severely lack high school preparation in United States, especially for preparing students to pick a career. You know, I remember giving Jason a tour when he was visiting Penn, and I showed him some senior design, and I'm pretty sure he knew that some of these things he never imagined happens in part of your engineering curriculum. And I think that goes back to how we are very high tech in engineering school, but we're pretty low tech in high school. The preparation of a freshman to understand what aspects of research will really matter is really hard to do. And I think, Andy, you're right. The freshmen will go where you tell them what's most exciting. They'll trust you, they'll believe you in a way that they see that, oh, this is where all the excitement is. But I think ultimately freshmen should try different things. We are very lucky at Penn that we have a very integrated robotics, very integrated energy program. You know, we have health tech and we have biology, we have chemical engineering. We are a lot of things in school. And if you take sum of parts for a freshman, that's very confusing. So a lot of my freshman introduction in our class is just, first of all, take them piece by piece and tell them where the excitement could be. Remember, 4 years from now, when they graduate, the trends might have shifted, right? People tend to think of jobs as a very important trend setter. But actually, the trends that you see from the markets are actually just a sign that there may be a slowdown, but the excitement usually comes after a few years, okay? So there is excitement, people rush, then there is a little bit of a withdrawal, but the technology actually takes off in a couple of years. So I have a very strong feeling that our Penn engineers will end up becoming closer to technology wherever they go, but for freshmen, they should focus on things that are fundamental since they're in engineering school.
Yeah, something I want to respond to from that was, you explicitly mentioned that me and you walked around Penn for a little bit, maybe like 5 years ago before I actually started my degree here. And I was like, wow, like, what's that? I've never seen this. And, kind of just to build off that, like that feeling didn't really go away throughout like my freshman year and still kind of hasn't. Which I guess, we could look at that in any number of ways. But I guess just starting from the beginning of my degree, like I remember in Meme 101, a class that Andy here has TA'd about 7,000 times actually. In Meme 101, one of the big skills is learning how to do CAD, computer aided design. And I had never used CAD before. And so not only had I never used it, I had never even seen it. I didn't know what it looked like. It was very new to me. And so to think that, I came to Penn expecting to like, I guess, continue the trend from high school of like, catching on to all these technical skills pretty quickly, like, AP calculus, AP physics and stuff like that. Like, it definitely kind of was a shock to me that there were such different areas of focus than what I had always thought to be like the main academic and like functional skills within engineering. Which, I guess does arise interesting questions about like, should I have learned that stuff back in high school? Like, is
And
it
that is exactly, I'm going to stop you there because that's where I want
Yeah.
to pick up, which is on another point that Sid mentioned, which is, so what can we do as a university to support not only local high schools, but just high schools in general to maybe better prepare students for what's coming up here? What role? Because of course, the role of the university is where you specialize on, hopefully, like the discipline that you end up doing in the future. And you're saying that folks in general have a hard time trying to find that thing that sparks their interest. So, because I'm trying to, like, while you're thinking that, I've always had an impression that the educational system in here was quite good, but maybe I'm faced with a bias, well, two different biases, which is where I come from is not as good because it's a developing country, and maybe the fact that the folks that I meet here, of course, come from the backgrounds that are not entirely representative of the whole country. So I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Andy, and yes, and both of you have, it's a very important point. Now at Penn, we would admit students who have very good background in science and math in engineering school. So I think there are certain prerequisites we ask students have, but even then, there is a large number of students who would struggle with math and physics, and to an extent chemistry also, only because the course rigor that comes from a very typical freshman and a sophomore class is pretty high, and I think that keeps people in a state where they're constantly challenged. Right now, it's a double-edged sword. When you challenge a student, and everybody has different thresholds of their preparations. Some are going to feel very energized and they're going to take it all in and they're going to fall in love with it, and they would get infected by this rigor of the classes. There are also significant number of students who are not able to manage all the courses that they're taking, and then they're trying to figure out what's the best way to give time to a class that's hardest for me. How do I manage that with my social life? So I think there is an element of adjustment, and I wish that there was a bit of that rigor transferred in the high school, so that students become a little better time managers. I don't think we need to do knowledge transfer. I think we need to just have a little better adjustment to knowing how do you take up something new and learn, ask for help, which is an important quality, and be able to work in a team so that you kind of learn from each other. So when they come to a university or put in a class of 50, and everybody has very different skill sets, and then an exam comes which is curved, you're going to have some adjustment time in those, and I hope students don't find that as a very difficult barrier to move on. One of the things that Penn Engineering has done phenomenally well is admit students who are first generation low income, and I can imagine that the opportunity they have to come to Penn Engineering, to Penn, is unbelievably good. But it is very likely sometimes that the schools they are coming from may not have been able to give them enough preparation to manage their time. So I find that adjustment to be the hardest for students. I think the high schools do a decent job of allowing people to do AP and other things. So Andy, you and I come from a place where AP was not a choice. I didn't
that is, I was just about to say that, or not that I'm a proponent for the IB program or the A-level exams, but it seems to me from folks that I've spoken with in the past that does prepare you a little bit better for university. Not only in choosing what you want to study, but also with independent study components through your, I think, I don't remember how it was called, like the research paper that you had to write for the IB. But just to pick on that point that you're mentioning, is that I've always understood college as a normalizing experience, both educationally, but also in social backgrounds. Because you come to Penn, and we're all the same student in theory. And I don't care where you were, whether you were born with a silver spoon, whether you're with a math whiz, whatever, we are at the same place now, and you can treat, we are equals. And so that's like, because of those disparities that maybe some folks might have a slightly easier time than others. At least that's how I see it coming from Latin America, where of course my background is going to be very different from like students that I will encounter in here. But I like to think that at least with class of 22, while we were all students at the same time, there's nothing that differentiates me from you. We are Penn students. Now what you do later with your life, then yes, you're back in the real world, and then yes, we are different. But when you're here, that's normalizing experience. So you would think that in theory, all Penn graduates should, of course, this varies depending on whatever area you study, but you should have like the same, equipped with the same tools and skills to succeed in whatever you'll be doing. But yeah, it's a challenging problem, the one you're describing.
Sure, absolutely.
Andy, something I'm kind of curious to hear. It sounds like just now you kind of spoke a bit to the fact that getting here kind of equalizes students from having, all come from different backgrounds. Something that we've spoken about in the past, though, that maybe our listeners and would be curious to hop in on, though, is that in terms of the drive that students have here, you seem to think that there might be differences between people who come from different places as far as how much they're driven, even if they might be the same in terms of what they're actually able to achieve here.
100% agree.
Using you as an example, Andy, and you could speak to this much better than I can. You would often tell me, how hard it is to get from Argentina to UPenn. How amazing it is to see all these options and opportunities available to us. Like, we were at Thanksgiving this year, and you said what you were thankful for was that you could wake up every morning and follow your dreams. Like that was the thing. It wasn't family, it wasn't food, it was that you could do what you want to do in life. And
I will say also the friendships that I was able to make along the way as well. No, brother. No, but just to speak to your point, yes, sometimes you're at a place like this one and folks complain with all due reason, right? Because it gets hard. You are at one of the best institutions, and not the best one in many regards of higher education. So you will be challenged. But that is part of the contract. Like you should know that, right? When you're applying to a school like this one. At the same time, you should also know that acceptance rates are extremely low. So the fact that you're here, it's a privilege in all sorts of ways you can think of it, because you're given, it's an environment where you can push learning to whatever limit that you want. If you're the type of person that takes advantage of opportunities, and especially if you like what I think Penn does best, which is sort of this multidisciplinary approach, you can construct an education that is just truly unique. Now, what I will say, which brings to your earlier point, Jay, is that I think that sometimes when you really fought for the place or like the position in which you are, maybe your mentality is that you want to seize a lot more the opportunities that you have in front of you, because you look at your background, you look at your past, and you realize, well, you're extremely lucky to be here and you have this hunger that maybe people, because of different backgrounds, might lack. And that's why you see, I don't know, I leave it there, and I'm happy to continue. Yeah.
Let me ask you both a question. And this was something I had in mind, you know, when I wanted to think of things I would love to point out in this talk. Why do we have Penn students? Penn students are known for their pre-professional, you know, culture here. I have actually found that most Penn students are extremely hardworking. They're very knowledge driven. The students I know are really excited about learning new things. What is it that you feel that we should do better in making the feeling that this curiosity driven learning should be the foundation? Because we are going to give you all the skills, we're going to give you foundation. What other things could we do in experiential learning or in any other ways that would make this even more exciting?
I'll answer that first, if you allow me, Jay. I have like this thought that I don't want to run, and I'll let you. I think, you know, what's the biggest problem, in my opinion, even though I don't mind it, but again, you're signing this contract when you come here, but it's the fact that classes are graded, sometimes with a curve. Because I think students and that preparation culture goes to the fact that you want to beat your competition. So you don't see your classmates, that your collaborators, you see them as people that might get that grade, that you might not grade, because there's a curve, right? There's a certain amount of these grades that the professor will be assigning. And that will prevent me from maybe getting that one dream job in that consulting company where I'll be extremely happy for the rest of my life, right? I'm not speaking for myself, of course. But what I mean to say is that maybe sometimes if you could encourage a type of learning that is more project-based, and where the emphasis is not on how well you perform, but in how you are actually learning and incorporating those things that you're learning, pursuing these different ideas. And that's something that at least myself as a TA for a class, I would not an educator, but I do have in me 101, the class that Jay was mentioning, a lot of power over the grades that I give. And now, hoping that Dustin will never hear this conversation that we're having as free. Dustin is the professor. I do have a lot of freedom with the grades that I can assign in that class. And I will say that sometimes I value a lot more the effort or the fact that you're learning and incorporating these topics, and I'm understanding that you have a lot of things going on in your life besides this class that might prevent you from doing your better self. But if you can show me that you've learned and you're having a good time in this class and you're passionate about it, for me, what the letter A means is approve. It doesn't mean that you're excellent. It means that you've satisfied the minimum. It's meaningless, like A, B, C, D, E, K, Z. It's just like the fact that you're able to demonstrate, because at the same time, you are paying for this education. So if you're not making use of it, you're wasting your money as well. So for me, I'll give you, if you care about your grade, I'll give you the grade, but I want to ensure that you learn.
Any other opinions, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. I myself have really done a 180 in terms of my priorities in college ever since freshman year. Back in freshman year, I was pretty gung-ho on, you know, getting good grades. Like, part of that is because your GPA starts at like 0 divided by 0, and so you want to give it some positive inertia there. But especially, I mean, this is what, my 9th semester at Penn. Like, at this point, grades really don't matter much, and what matters much more is what projects you make that you can then stick a picture of that project on your portfolio, and you'll show it to recruiters there. Like even within the scope of classes, the grades don't matter as much as like the exploration and the learning and the output. And then outside the scope of classes, it's all that times 10. Like, if you're doing a research project, which Andy has published like 8 papers or something, Sid has overseen like hundreds of senior design projects. Like, in those contexts, you know, it's even more to the point that it matters much more kind of what like maybe pre-established norms you try to break, and what like kind of revolutionary new inventions you've created, whether that be in like the machine shop or in like a robotics lab, much more than like how well you were able to like plug stuff into the formula. And I think a lot of Penn classes, especially earlier on ones, and kind of tying into our discussion earlier about some of the issues with high school. So a lot of this applies to high school as well. A lot of the issues with those classes is that they're very mechanical, and I don't mean mechanical engineering. Funny coincidence of words there. I mean more like in terms of like systems in place that help you get from point A to point B in like a very specific path. It almost promotes that specific mentality of like following a formula much more than I think it should, both in high school and in some Penn classes. And I think that's kind of counterproductive to us actually learning the skills of being an engineer, which is figuring out stuff for ourselves, not just like finding the inputs to like run it through the predetermined formula.
And I'll add just to that statement before I forget is that I think in general we're very risk aversive, and that is something that I'm not sure how we can change from an educational point of view. That it's okay to take risks and challenge yourself, doing something that maybe might not give you the grade that you're expecting, but like when you think about that curve of like learning and like personal fulfillment, it just maximizes that. But I will say, and I think maybe you've seen it, Sid, because you were our instructor during the class, but I was extremely scared the first time that Landon came to me telling me, do you want to do this airplanes? I know you love airplanes, but do you want to do it in systems engineering? And I told him, like, systems engineering? I'm not a systems engineer. Like, how can I even like do well in this class? It's gonna be terrible. I don't think I can contribute. Among 100 other reasons, he told me, no, trust me, like do it. You will like it. Sid is an excellent guy, by the way. So like, and you will do airplane stuff, which you really like. And today, if you ask me what was the best class, or at least the best experience that I had in the last year, was working on that senior design team with Arnav and Landon. Especially because today that was as I'm applying to PhD programs. And literally being able to speak about those beautiful projects that we worked on was great. And just expanding your horizons, do something new. That challenges yourself and you learn like this cool stuff about multilinear optimization and data science that before I didn't know much about. Still today, I do not know much about, but I'm familiar with a little bit more. On top of working with excellent professors, right, like Megan, who I hold very deeply in my heart. But yes, like how can you incentivize those? You need to take those risks and see what happens.
Something that I kind of want to piggyback off there, Andy, something I noticed in like much of the stuff you've said over the last like 40 minutes is that you keep referencing other people. I mean, obviously me and Sid here, you mentioned Landon, you mentioned, Megan, Dustin. It seems like your experience, even within the academic realm, which is not all there is to college, but even within engineering, your experience is dominated by what other people will push you to do, like you're not just sitting in a vacuum, like designing like buildings or something like that. Like you're very driven by other people. And that's kind of something I want to piggyback off of, which Sid had mentioned long ago in this conversation as well, that like Penn has become much more collaborative. Andy had mentioned there are some caveats, like sometimes Penn is almost more competitive than collaborative when grades play more of an issue, but in a lot of the areas you just said, Andy, grades thankfully were not, bringing out any of that competitive nature of people. And it was really just about who you're friends with or who you're learning from in class as your professors and what kinds of things they might motivate you to do. Like I never would have taken IPD 501 if this guy on this call right now with me, Andy, never said, hey, Jay, let's take this class together. And now I have like 5 cool projects that I can hold in my hand right now because he pushed me.
And I hope you do become the TA next semester. You'll take my word.
Maybe I will. That's a discussion for another time. But taking IPD 501, like Sid having our like bi-weekly check-ins in senior design saying, yeah, I think you can do this, go for it. Or really the whole interdisciplinary nature of robotics and of engineering at Penn, that Andy said he did a whole project in a discipline he didn't even know, kind of delving into the unknown because he had people to go with, which I think really just highlights the importance of surrounding yourself with people who drive you, both in terms of trying things that you're, unfamiliar with, and also just staying focused. Like last night, and I had a final like an hour ago, and last night I had to study for it. I was sitting with Andy in a library And every time I want to check my phone, I looked over and I'm like, this dude hasn't checked his phone in like an hour. Like if I check my phone, I'll be that guy. And it really makes a difference, just having someone to keep you.
It could very well be the case. I was right. I didn't have any battery in my phone, which is false. It's false. But I'm just giving you the benefit of the doubt.
Well, thank you. Thank you. But yeah, I guess, Sid, I'm curious to turn it back to you. It seems a lot of good stuff has been discussed now, but especially that last point I made about collaboration. That's something that I think out of all the professors we've talked to, you come to mind as like the collaboration, like the social guy, like out of all the engineers I know, you seem to have more personality just in how you talk, like the passion with which you talk about things, either technical or social or introspective or whatever. Not to mention on the technical side that, you teach a class that literally strives to help people create great projects and teams. So I'm curious for your take on the importance of collaboration, how to make sure it's happening, maybe from the administrative side, really anything along those lines.
So I think, by the way, thanks for all the warm words. But so one of the things engineers don't do very well is communicate with each other. I mean, you are friends, you talk a lot, and you both may be on the side of the curve that don't mind talking and collaborating. But there are also quite a few significant engineers who are great problem solvers, but they would rather be left alone. And I think what we are seeing in engineering, as you know, that the problems are more complex. Problems require significant interaction between experts in your team, wherever you're going to go and work, even if you go and do research. So I'm hoping that as we make you very sharp, very educated, very driven, that you don't forget the huge benefit that comes from being able to communicate clearly about any aspect of your technical expertise. And a lot of innovation, sure, you could be one of those who could single-handedly do the best math and publish and get great research. But even that now requires collaboration. So how do we do that in an academic environment where we are kind of isolated? And one of the things we can do is by creating hands-on elements of your education that require collaboration, right? So in engineering, we're very lucky that we can actually educate ourselves through experiences. And not every major has that physical aspect to learning, right? Especially in mechanical, electrical, chemical, or material. Any engineering you see has a physical element to prove, to take on, to kind of validate your ideas. So could we have a very strong interdepartmental lab program, hopefully at Penn very soon, right? Where we don't have to necessarily isolate knowledge by department. We could isolate skills that you all need to do a certain things, right? One of the other things that we could do is bring on research academically right in the front and center for students' educational experience. Instead of trying to you go and reach to a faculty, instead of you waiting till senior year to build something this long, could we do this early on? Could we do this sophomore year, junior year?
Well, actually, just since you're mentioning that, because like two very beautiful things that you said that I wasn't going to mention again, but I thought they were great. Yes, I would really love like a multidisciplinary, well, I won't be here anymore, but a multidisciplinary lab course. Or I believe the way they teach, for instance, engineering in the UK, at least at the very 3 years, it's just general engineering, where you learn. I think everybody takes classes to everybody, and even though you might want to specialize in mechanical, you still learn about chemical and computer science. But maybe that model wouldn't work here in the US, but that multidisciplinary lab would.
Yeah.
But another one that you just said is that maybe what if we force students for one semester, which is, I'll say force, but I'll rephrase it in a second, to pursue independent study within engineering, which is some universities, instead of having senior design, they have a senior thesis. In fact, I believe computer science here does that. I prefer senior.
Yeah, they have a choice. They
have a choice.
Or a project.
Well, I would support more like the team project because of all of the things that we were talking about. But at the same time, if you were to force students through one class to maybe half a credit class, if you don't want to make it too intensive, to do a research project, I think there's a lot of very interesting skills that one can learn, especially when it can be in not your department. It could potentially be in any department.
And I think we do. I think summer is a great time at Penn to experiment. And I know that that's something you've both experienced and you've done it very, very well. But, you know, if you see that Penn is so selective, let's say 8% of the applicants come in to Penn, okay? We already have a super selective student population. And so I would want 100% of those 8% to get full experience, you know, instead of them feeling marginalized here at Penn. We should really consider that our challenge from the administrator side to have 100% experience for 100% of the students. And I think that's a lofty goal, but we have the best talent. I mean, we can't ask for more, right? People have different learning mechanisms, and I think we should be better at recognizing also some of these things. But I think we need to kind of think in a more flexible way. And pandemic for us was a very, very eye-opening experience, right? So we, for the first time, had this hybrid, flexible way of bringing information to you. We call it high flex. It's hybrid and flexible, okay? And that changed people's expectations that folks can actually do things on their own collaboratively. I mean, there is a lot of unneeded collaboration, but most of the collaboration was actually very useful, that students were learning a lot without being physically present. It wasn't perfect. I don't think it will stand on its own if you're completely online all the time when you are in an undergraduate program, but it opened up new avenues for us to say, how do we bring the design, measure, refine, and then simulate and again design kind of an experience, because we have software that didn't exist. We have simulations that didn't exist. So I think there are tons of opportunities from administrative side to bring even more excitement to learning. And we need to just supplement it instead of bringing it all in the classroom, because I think in engineering, we have a choice of doing things in the lab environment, in a class environment. I think they're very lucky to have that. So I'm hoping that once you graduate and you come next time to visit me, that we'll be proud to tell you some of the other things that we are actually trying to make things a little more exciting here.
But do you think, this is a hard question, and I have my answer, but I want to hear from you, that a lot of the things that you're mentioning, especially like cultivating that excitement in the students about learning, isn't that a lot of the responsibility of the instructor too?
It is.
Or that class?
I think it is, but I also think that it needs to be cultivated across the different department majors in engineering, right? And we have the best shot at doing it. You know, if engineering has the best shot at making things exciting, because we have a physical aspect of most subject matter, right? If you're doing aero, you know there are rockets and planes that fly. You know, it's not a fiction. And I think we just need to kind of say, do we have the software and educational tools to capture your mind, right? If social media can capture 5 hours of your mind every day, okay, why can't education be there? I mean, it's proven that social media can be addicting. Well, why can't we be addicting? There must be something we can do in a more.
Well, I think maybe well, I am biased when I say this, but I think many students might not actually be aware of all of these different, exciting, beautiful things that one can do here. Like
Sure.
it's more like a plug and check process of I come to class, I do my work, and I go partying later. And you forget about like all of the spectacular results. So maybe do you think we could do a better job publicizing that?
Maybe.
Well, these are some of the very, and I know you do that because in one of the, I believe in one of the intro classes that you teach,
Sure.
you bring professors to speak about the research, right? Or alumni like Max, Lee,
Yes.
who have graduated already, to speak about what they've done and where they are right now. Or no, so I think that is great, but not everybody in engineering does that.
Right. And I think it's a matter of feedback also that should come through, your channel, not just us being the only propagating factors. But I think there is a huge opportunity still waiting to be explored. But there's no doubt we need as many or more engineers as we have now. So we certainly need to look up.
Yeah, I guess something else that, maybe I'm making something out of nothing here, but something you said earlier, Sid, about that everybody spends like 5 hours a day on their phones. That kind of brought to mind, a little bit of a separate discussion here about just like people's attentiveness, and even if they have all the drive in the world and all the interest in engineering in the world, just ability to set aside the time to do whatever engineering they're going to do, whether that be like self-guided exploration or like doing work for classes. And I also thought of that because when you mentioned earlier that COVID opened up a lot of new avenues, and obviously there were limitations, but for me, one of the biggest avenues that opened up was that was the most I was ever able to focus in my life, because there was just nothing else happening. And then I really, when I got back to Penn last year for my senior year, could feel the contrast between that and then when you are at Penn and there's like all these other things happening, like students organizing BYOs, like going out for birthdays, like running into somebody and having like unexpected like 2-hour lunch catch-ups. Like all these are great things, but it does kind of pull us from our real attentiveness and focus on engineering. And I guess
But everything in life is a balance, right?
it is,
Like
I guess.
because you're trying, yes, you want to see, of course, in what side of that balance I am. Right? I wouldn't value my personal life so much. But those people that do is fine because that's again, it's your personal balance of how you do that.
Yeah. And I just bring it up because, like you said, everything in life is a balance. And so it's important to, in the middle of these discussions on like how to best bring out maybe the creativity in engineers, bring out the drive, like to realize that that's not the only limiting factor at play here. Like maybe people are struggling to find a balance, and it could be a meaningful thing to ask about how we can help them find it and how we can ensure that that balance does in fact include enough about engineering, or maybe even the balance within engineering includes enough exploration and you're not just spending 100% of your waking like focus hours just like doing problem sets, because sometimes if you're in 5 classes and then you got 5 problem sets a week, then you get very caught up in that and you don't really have as much remaining brain power to explore new things or try new things, or maybe try out a whole new platform or a new software you've never used before. Like, how do you think we can get people to consciously make the time and want to make the time, even when life gets in the way, as it often does at such an overwhelming university in a very busy city?
No, I think it's a challenge, Jason, well put together. I think pandemic was certainly a time when we all had the best, singular attention on a lot of things. So I think you will also find things that you like, usually people kind of do the most of their time spent on it. And perhaps the challenge for us is, are we making you fall in love with content which is being delivered in the most excitable way, right? I think that's the challenge from the administrative side, that what can we do in every possible way to make things exciting and and it kind of allows students to be less risk averse and more motivated. But it's a challenge. Educational also has a lot of legacy, also has a lot of baggage that it's dealing with. We have courses that needs to find relevance in this age when things are moving so fast, right? I'm sure with ChatGPT that I'm sure you have played with and tinkered with, it's going to change the way people write their homeworks.
As a side note, I took a final exam an hour ago in my artificial intelligence class, and had questions about ChatGPT, and we just completed a homework on it. If any listeners aren't familiar, look it up. It's crazy. AI is getting out of hand. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, this is exactly. But look, it's these kind of disruptions that make the tech side exciting, right? So could we bring disruptions as more exciting aspect of education instead of more distracting side of education? And I think we can do both. We have here enough faculty brain power at Penn to kind of teach the most difficult of all courses. The question is, can we have majority of our population do very hard classes and get the most out of Penn? I think that's a challenge for universities that have all this brain power.
I would say, no, before you continue, I will say that sometimes, something that at least I've seen is that you're doing all of this math or engineering, but you realize, you forget, well, maybe you forget, you're not told what it's used for. Yeah. Or why do I care about this dynamical system? Why is it important that I know about this? And at least for me, my biggest transformation came actually last year when I took for the first time an energy policy class, where I was actually taught for the first time about the impacts of climate change. And that's funny because I was in an energy program at Penn, where I was supposed to do energy research, but you kind of forget, like, well, why do we do energy research? Everybody knows about climate change, but not maybe about the urgency of that matter. I think maybe that excitement can also be mission driven about why there's maybe this big problem or this big challenge that our current generation is facing right now. And that's why you need to learn about these things so that you can produce projects that tackle them. But that wasn't actually something that was particularly highlighted during at least my classes.
Yeah, and I think, Andy, you're right. If we become better at allowing students to make the access to this material more exciting, right? Like, think of the CHIPS Act. It's happening. US is going to become manufacturing powerhouse. Inshoring is back instead of outshoring. And we should capitalize on the high-tech aspect of what it's going to do. And I think things like these, that disruptions, they're coming from policy. University didn't predict it, but I think there has to be a mechanism of bringing that excitement into the classroom. I think labs are one way of doing it. When you make something that's very exciting, kind of brings you excitement back. But we have to kind of keep on doing this educational aspect and work on it every year. It can't be kind of be left in once in few years.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that, as much as we all do generally love math and science and some of the foundational pieces, SolidWorks, the reason we do it is to some end, and it's very easy to forget that end. Like you mentioned ChatGPT earlier, like when I was exploring that for a homework a couple days ago, that was like the coolest thing in the world. Like I could just write in a text box, like, who's the best baseball player in the world, and it told me who. Like, it's crazy.
Well, may I know who?
I think you already know who, Andy.
What is it? Babe Ruth?
Oh, well, I meant current player, but
well, like Aaron Judge.
Aaron Judge, yes.
Do you think the author of ChatGPT might be biased towards the New York Yankees?
I think the author of ChatGPT might be biased towards statistics.
Why not Bryce Harper? Why not Justin Verlander?
I I could do a pretty easy statistical response to that question, but maybe off record. We'll do that later. But no, it was super cool seeing that that's a potential outcome of all this code that people write in AI classes and AI research. But oftentimes during the actual assignments, I'm just thinking, how did my professor say I should implement this one very specific algorithm? And I kind of like, they say I have this poster on my wall. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. It's very often hard to remember where the journey is actually going because you're so caught up in whatever is the current step. And if,
Yeah.
maybe all it takes is more frequent reminders of what the end goal is. Maybe people just have to search on YouTube more often, video of this thing working to remember, oh, that's what I'm striving for, because it's just very hard to remember in the moment when you get caught up in maybe little bugs and you get discouraged and you say, oh, how am I ever going to do this? And my friend hasn't responded about this project in like 3 hours. Like, you start telling yourself these things, but at the end of the day, like, we all are very driven to these same goals.
But I will play the devil's advocate, because I know you also have another phrase poster around there, which is you don't realize what's the value of a moment until it's gone or until it already happened, right? So yes, you can think always about the end with the thing that you're doing, but don't forget to enjoy the present moment right now, or no?
I agree.
Like moments like this, to be honest.
If anything, Andy, you're fueling the previous thing I had said about how it's tough to find a balance at Penn, because as much as I want to go solve all these engineering problems in the world, I know, Andy, that I'm not going to see you a whole lot after like this Saturday. So I kind of want to just go sit down for dinner and have a calm evening, together and not worry about engineering stuff. So sometimes it's harder to think, how am I going to keep grinding out the little things now towards some big end, towards some big picture goal. And it's easier to just say, I'd rather just enjoy myself right now. And that is one of the balances that we are continually looking for and always failing to find, but always coming a little closer. So on that note, guys, we're about an hour in.
Before we finish or anything, I do want to ask you the question, and I apologize for the background noise. Sometimes there were like people here yelling at me, like in any case, what I want to say is, like, where do you find like that happiness, that smile that you always put to like everything? What gives you that beautiful fulfillment, that feeling that is contagious to all of us? What drives you, Sid?
So Andy, I tell you the first thing. One is I'm surrounded by fountain of youth. Okay. So the energy is infectious. So that's the first thing. Okay. So if you were around, I am taking away some energy from you that you don't realize. So that's the first part. Okay. The second part is, I think I am very fortunate that I've been fan of project-based learning, which became my job of project-based teaching and managing, program that allows people to do it. Okay. So it's a huge satisfaction of being able to do what you wanted to do in a career, in a job, and that too for several years. So there is some gratefulness, some gratitude built into my daily life. But I think beyond that, Penn is a wonderful place to work, as you may find if you come back. Penn, I think if you surround yourself by people who can talk, in the hallways, and you could discuss a very important subject matter in like 10 minutes and find a solution. That's a very, very high quality experience on a daily basis. Okay. But that's how I would say it. I'm fortunate, and that every year brings a great class. I make great friendships, like I am with two of you. This has been a very memorable chat on record now. So it's actually fun. But Andy, I'm glad your time at Penn was great. And Jason, I'm very, very happy your time at Penn was great. This is the best part of my seeing both of you in a happy state. So
I think I speak for both of us that first, it means a lot to hear that from you. but our time at Penn is great because of people like you that make it great. And not only people like you, people like the guy that I have on top of me in the Zoom as well. And it's just an environment that pushes you and learn like mutually overall. At least that's my take. If I was a part of a fraternity, probably my feelings would be different. But I'm not, thankfully, because I make smart decisions.
Yeah, that's a relative proposition. Okay, it depends who you ask. But I forgot to mention that, what makes me also happy that where I work is where my girls went to college, so I couldn't ask for more. We got 4 more years of proximity out of them, so that's actually wonderful too.
Yeah, I mean, ditto on all that. I'm so thankful for the 9 semesters, soon to be 10, that I've had here at Penn. For a million reasons that we've listed off a lot of them in the last couple minutes here. But probably the top is the people, for sure. Like people who I could just like, how many other schools you could just text your professor, say, hey, you want to come on my podcast? And then like 4 days later, you're in a Zoom call chatting about life and stuff. Like that's crazy. Like I never would have thought that this would have been the setting I'd find myself in, and these would be the people, and I would have worked on all the projects and the classes and that stuff. But here we are, and I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. So thank you guys for making my experience that way. I appreciate your words that I've helped make your experience better as well. And I think that's probably a good stopping point. So more broadly, thank you both for the last hour of your time. I really enjoyed chatting. A lot of interesting takeaways. I hope that some people listening now found it to be meaningful as well. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.
Tuning out for this
See you
episode.
guys both soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.